On with us now, NFL Network, three-time Super Bowl champ, working in the front office for the Patriots, and every accolade you could possibly imagine for making those executive decisions, Scott Pioli. Scott, what's up, man?
Hey, Bobby. Thanks for having me, man. This is really cool. I got to tell you, I got so excited when I was asked to come on, so thank you so much for having me.
Hey,
really appreciate it.
Same to be able to talk to you. And the question that I want to start with is, I know at the Combine, we're talking draft, and we're watching players, and we're listening to their responses with the media. But are there a lot of deals not involving those specific players that are being discussed in Indy this weekend?
Oh, gosh, yeah. This is, back in the day, it was clandestine and quiet. I work for the league. Can I say the word tampering? I'm going to say it anyway, Bobby. Conversations about potential free agents, potential trades. There's a lot of meetings that go on. There's agents that are out here that represent players not only that are free agents or teams maybe, that are not happy with their situation and circumstance, that are trying to get out of where they are. So they're meeting with general managers and coaches from other teams trying to find ways to make things happen in the future or, in the near future. So, yeah, there's so much more that goes on out here. I mean, the league has competition committee meetings. There's so much that happens behind the scenes with teams, with the league office, with the future of the game while we're out here.
Are there instances where it's not official, but maybe a GM or an assistant GM says to another team, hey, meet me at Starbucks at noon, off the record, we got to talk about Lamar, and see, like, where nobody else knows they're meeting, and then all of a sudden the deal is struck?
Absolutely. But here's what I'll tell you, Bobby. It's never Starbucks. Starbucks is too crowded and it's too popular. Okay. There's a couple of off-the-grid coffee spots that I can't name because then reporters will start hanging out and revealing those, and secret meeting places. Sometimes it's just hotel rooms. Teams have they'll have rooms for the individual GM or head coach, and then they have rooms that stay empty until they've got to meet with somebody. But it won't be at the Starbucks for sure.
As a former GM, as one of the best to ever do it, can you give us like a perspective on the inside of what's happening between Lamar and the Ravens and what that process is like inside?
Yeah, Bobby, I do, only from the sense that, particularly when I was with the Patriots, we had couple of players who ended up representing themselves. And I'll never forget, one of them ended up being Teddy Bruschi. He had Brad Blank for most of his career as his agent, and near the end, he represented himself. And I'm talking about this situation, but it's very similar to Lamar. When there's no intermediary, you have to be very intentional and careful about your word selection. And it's interesting because sometimes in negotiations, everyone's trying to get to the same place, right? They have different things that they need covered from their perspective. The player wants to maximize the deal, maximize security, not only of money, but of their job security. They don't want just the money. And then the team, wants to build a team and wants to make it work. And sometimes those negotiations, and Bob, you've been in negotiations, and they sometimes become competitive, especially when it's between dudes, right? Our testosterone gets going. And it becomes this competition thing. And when there's an intermediary as an agent, sometimes you can say things in frustration that you cannot say in the moment when you're dealing directly with the player. And I know there were times that, thankfully, Teddy and I had a close personal relationship too, so we were able to talk about things. But it is a very different dynamic because you have to get to a place that's going to be good for the team without ever unintentionally insulting the player. And I know Eric DeCosta is going through that right now. It's funny. I was in their training camp last year, and I met with both, Lamar privately, and I met with Eric privately, and I really thought something was going to get done. I really did. And I've not asked Eric because, being a former GM, you don't like to poke into other people's business too much, but it is an incredibly, at times, awkward dynamic, Bobby.
With this dynamic, and at times I have not had an agent, and I would represent myself. And then I realized that the 10% that I would be paying to my agent, and every percentage is different, but the 10% that I would be paying to my agent was worth it because they were going to make me 13% more than what I would have made, right? So there's a net gain of 3% here. In my world, the best thing I did was find an agent, then fire that one and get another one. But when it comes to Lamar, and you're not biased in this situation at all, Like, would you say, Lamar, it really would be in your best interest to have somebody help you in this process? Or is Lamar just such a different dude that, like, you get it and you understand what he's going for?
Well, I understand it. I do. I don't know what to recommend for him because it's funny. You mentioned your personal situation. I was in a different but similar situation. When I was a GM, I think I was the only GM in the league or head coach that didn't have an agent for all those years. Then when I got into the media business, I got an agent because of what I didn't know and for some of the same reasons that you're talking about. In the case of Lamar, each one of us makes decisions like this to have an agent or not have an agent based on our own personal history and maybe some of the ghosts chasing us in life or the lack of trust in relationships. Maybe he hasn't found someone that could be an agent that he trusts enough. And again, I'm just speculating. There's a million reasons why. And unless you're the individual person, I think as I've gotten older, Bobby, I've learned to, make suggestions, but tap the brakes a little bit on advice when you don't know what a person's past and history has been, because, we all have different, I don't want to say ghost chasing us, but there's a reason he's not doing it, and only he knows the reason he doesn't want an agent. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, we're all different. We all have a drum. We're marching. I mean, his march, though, is a little, like, I would just be like, dude, you can make so much more money if you just paid a little bit of money. But I'm not Lamar in every way. Like, I'm not skilled. I'm not talented. I'm not athletic, all that. Scott Pioli is on with us, like one of the greatest general managers to ever do it. And I want to ask you one other question before we get into specifics about the combine, but it does involve the Pats. And can Bill O'Brien help Mac Jones get back on track? Can Mac Jones get back on track next year?
Absolutely. And I don't know what all the dynamics were that changed this year because, it's interesting. I worked as a consultant for the Alabama football program when Mac was there and Billy O was there as a coordinator. And, I was really confident that Mac was going to be a good player in the NFL, and he had that terrific rookie year. I'm not sure, unless you were in there every single day, you're not sure what the dynamics were. Was it Mac? Was it the play? We don't know what the dynamics were where I don't know if it was digressing or if he just stayed the same, but it wasn't, it could be better. Billy O'Brien is one heck of an offensive coordinator. He's one heck of a football coach, and he knows Mac. They've spent time together. He knows his strengths. He knows his limitations. Most importantly, he knows how to communicate with him. And that's not saying that someone else at the Patriots didn't know how to communicate with him, but he knows exactly how to motivate him and communicate him. And the other thing is this, Bobby, I think when you're talking about quarterbacks, their comfort is important. And when any one of us has a comfort and feeling of security, we can perform better. And I think the fact is, with Billy O being there, it's really going to help Mac out. And I also think this, there's a lot of people that can coordinate and organize and be prepared. Billy can do all that, and he's one heck of a play caller. Not all coordinators are great play callers. Billy O'Brien can do both of those things, or all of those things, I should say.
I'm going to ask you about size and stature, and it's going to get to Bryce Young in just a second. But did you ever not draft, or someone was on the fence, and I'm not asking the player at all, but you're like, they just didn't measure up to what we thought, so we're going to have to go with person B instead of person A.
Yeah, and what meaning, did we not draft someone because of?
Yeah, they were a little lighter, a little shorter, maybe didn't run quite as fast.
Yeah, I'll say this. I think I've swung in both directions, and sometimes taken risks on players that maybe didn't fit the prototype of their specific position, and it's worked out. And then it's been times when it didn't work out. Then there are times where I've said, maybe this isn't the best, idea because he's not the prototypical body or body type or size, whether that's height or weight. So I've done things in both directions and been successful, and then also done it and not been successful. It's that's why I don't think there's a true formula. Why you can't look at Bryce Young and say, "Hey, you're not going to do this. It's not going to work out," because of his physical stature. So I like I said, I've been in all of those places.
And if Bryce measures in an inch or 2 inches shorter and 180, 185. Would that scare you away from him? And I think I hear your answer is no. And if you're a team looking to trade up, I mean, do you still, pull the trigger and make that move for a Bryce Young?
Here's what I'll say. To answer the first question, would it deter me from picking him? Heck no. Again, because I've spent time around him. I've also spent time around getting to know his family, so I know the total package of what you're getting, and I would love for that guy to lead my football team. Absolutely love it. And will there be limitations? Yeah. Every quarterback has limitations. Every player in this league has limitations. And if you've got a good enough coaching staff that can not only develop the player, but put him in a position to succeed because they know his strengths and limitations, believe it or not, early in Tom Brady's career, he had some limitations. Our coaching staff did not only a great job of helping him develop, and he did an amazing job of developing himself, but they put him in situations and circumstances where he could do the best that he could do. And I'll digress here for a second. Remember, for the first couple of years of Brady's career, everyone was saying, well, all he does is dink and dunk. He can't throw the deep ball. Well, that was intentional because he didn't have the arm strength at the time. So we had high percentage throws. We had the extended running game, what we call, the short and intermediate balls. It allowed him to become confident and allowed the team to be confident. There were short passes that kept the other team's offenses off the field. We had a strong defense. It all made sense. You have a player like Bryce Young, you play to his strengths and you allow your team to don't put him in harm's way, because if he's got the body type that if it's underbulked, when he needs to be a smart player and not feed into the ego. And when people start saying, he runs out of bounds or he goes down too soon, you can't allow your ego to feed into that and put yourself in harm's way.
You guys should listen up. This is Scott Pioli, who was the Sports Illustrated GM Executive of the Decade for the 2000s. The decade.
Don't believe the hype.
Yeah, take the notes. Take notes. Take your pens out and listen to what he's saying. I want to talk about more analytics here. The 40 time. How valuable is that really?
I think you need to weight the value. And when I say weight, WEIGHT, hopefully I spelled that right. But you have to weight it because the speed is important. But that is a proactive running. I talked about this on the network yesterday. When you're on defense, most of your speed needs to be reactionary speed and responsive speed. So I remember there was a player who was one of the first legit 4-3 guys, and he was a safety. I won't mention his name, but he's one of the first legit 4-3 guys. But because his body type was high-hipped, and because he was stiff in his hips and his knees and his ankles, as a defensive back, he had to be reactively fast, right? Because when you're a safety, you're seeing, you're processing, you're dropping your hips, you're breaking on the ball, and then you go. But if all of that takes too much time to see, process, drop your hips, react, and then run your 4-3, you may be running about a 4-6. So I think it's an important part, Bobby, that you pay attention to, but you have to evaluate playing speed. And you can see playing speed on tape. You can see playing speed there's players who have faster playing speed. They play faster than what their time speed is. Jerry Rice, because he knew when to cut, how to cut. And there's this anticipatory skill that you can have or just the overall anticipation to know when to make cuts, because this is not a straight line game. So is it important? Yes, it's important, but it's only a piece of the puzzle, because I believe in analytics, but I also believe that they need to be married with the game for it to be a full picture.
Final 3 questions. When it comes to the interview part of the Combine, what is the most specific or one of the most specific questions you had to ask someone? Meaning, you're not going to ask anybody else this question, but this person coming into the room, maybe it's going to be funny or maybe it's going to be awkward, but it's a very specific question. What'd you have to ask?
Well, I'm trying to think of I wish I would have had that question last night to think about. But here's what I'll say. I think the most important questions are asking questions that are a little uncomfortable, but that you already know the answer to. Because asking someone a question about their past where there's maybe been a transgression and it's the truth, and seeing how they handle that is a sign of maturity, and also the fact of someone having grace for themselves. And I think sometimes asking questions that you already know the answer to and someone tells you the truth, it's a good way to start a relationship, even if it made that person uncomfortable. And I think it allows both sides to to start a relationship in a good place. I hope I articulated that well enough.
Yeah, and I didn't have the question last night. I literally just came up with it now. I'm pretty proud of myself. So, what you hear now is me patting myself on the shoulder for a great question, Scott. Okay, 2 questions left. Which former players, or excuse me, yeah, let's do former. And even today, what you've seen over the last couple of days, like let's do 1 or 2 former players that you saw at the combine and they wowed, and you're just like, I cannot believe what I'm seeing. This is amazing. And then give me 1 or 2 from so far what you've seen at the combine.
That I've seen so far today, or
yesterday.
Yesterday. I would say a wow moment yesterday was probably, watching Nolan Smith. That was a wow moment for his size to run what was a sub 4.40. That was a wow moment. Again, because he here's a player who had he missed the season last year, so had something taken away from him. So all he could do was train mostly in one specific area. And that because he couldn't lift because he tore his pec, and he could only control what he could control. What he did yesterday, I mean, was mind blowing. And again, I don't know if you saw the time yesterday.
I did.
A record number of guys. But Nolan Smith, for him to do that, it told me so much about him, because that's the only, he had to prepare for certain things, and he did it to the best of his ability.
Give me 1 old school, even like 5, 7, 10 years ago. Same situation. You're there. We know them now as a great player, but you were like, dang, I can't believe what I just saw.
I'm going to go with it was a combo kind of thing. It was what I saw and what I heard. It was when we met with Eric Berry at Kansas City before he drafted. Remember the safety?
I do.
Eric Berry became a Pro Bowler. Honestly, I think had it not been for him having cancer, probably would have had a gold jacket. Still one of my absolute, complete, total favorite experiences, spending time and watching him interact with people, just because he's truly one of the great NFL teammates. If there was I can't call him a Hall of Famer. If he had the time, he was certainly a Hall of Fame teammate. Love and respect him. And again, this experience here, because that thing, it's not just about, people get so focused because of what we put on TV at the NFL Network, but there's so much more to this that you can see. You watch how they interact with the people that are serving them here on the sidelines, in between drills, at meals, people that open the doors and clean. When you pay attention to see who they are as human beings, Bobby, again, we're building a team. We're not just looking for the biggest, fastest, strongest. You're looking for the right people to have a championship team.
Last question. What's the best Bill Belichick? Oh, go. What'd you say, Scott? You got to go? Is that what you said?
And after the last question, after the last question, I need 1 more minute to say one other thing, but please go ahead.
You got it. I thought you were going to give me an uncomfortable question to see if I was ready. I thought I was getting tested for the combine right now. Okay, last question for me. What's the best Bill Belichick draft day story or most memorable that you have from your time in New England?
Oh, man. He's still family. I don't know if I can share that.
Your most shareable. How about that? Your most shareable that we would think was cool.
Shareable.
Yeah.
There was a year that we were going to, I'll just say that we were talking about drafting an offensive lineman. Sometimes Bill's he's far funnier than people believe. There were times where he would be hard line about something, but it was either a test or he would be doing it in a joking way for the humor element. And I remember we were in this meeting and we were talking about Logan Mankins, and Bill, I think for theater, which he doesn't do often, but he was being very funny about it because I knew he loved Logan Mankins too, and we had the 32nd pick that year in the draft. And there were a number of other players that, we were hoping were going to be at 32. And he had said in a meeting previously in front of some of the scouts, and again, I think he did it somewhat for theater because he knew that I loved fat linemen too much, offensive and defensive linemen, and he was a skilled position guy. And he had said in this meeting, he says, I don't care if that effing guy is John Hanna. We ain't taking a guard in the first round. And he would. I knew he didn't mean it, and all the people in the meeting, there were people who were sitting there like, oh, my gosh. And sure enough, days later, we're in the first round of the draft. the couple of guys that we have that we would take ahead of Logan Mankins, I mean, the board's picked cleaner than a 2-day-old turkey after Thanksgiving. And there is Logan Mankins staring us in the face. And I wanted Logan so bad. And deep down inside, I know Bill did. And Bill just smiled at me and was like, F you, put the card in. And it was one of those moments because there were people in the draft room that had been in that other meeting. And I know Bill wanted Logan Mankins just as much as I did. But it was a funny moment because I think, again, the theater of the day before or the 2 days before, there were a couple of scouts like, oh, my gosh, if we're going to have to take Logan Mankins, Bill's going to be pissed. It was actually a very funny moment the way it unfolded.
That's a great story. If that's like the 9th story in the rankings of good, that's still a great story. I can't imagine the ones you can't tell, Scott. Oh, yeah. The floor is yours, Scott. What would you –
Well, here's what I want to say to you, Bobby, and I mean this sincerely because I don't know you, but I follow you and I know about you, and I got to tell you, I just have enormous respect for you, your path, your history, your life, and what you've overcome, and I mean it sincerely. Just want to let you know that I really couldn't wait to be on the show for that reason because I have so much personal, even though I don't know you personally, I have this personal respect for you and your path and the way that you've done things and all that you overcame. And for folks that just listen to you and don't know your story, I hope they get to know you a little bit better. So kudos to you, my brother.
Well, Scott, that is super kind. So thank you very much. I'm a massive fan of you as well. And like I said, you were the GM of the decade. What else can you say? I've done nothing of the decade. I've done nothing. I have no of the decades in my whole life. So, hey, Scott, thank you. I know you have a busy day today, so thank you for spending a few minutes with us, and I hope it goes awesome the rest of the camp.
All right. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.